Hi all. Today I wanted to talk about our newest CF role. This is the first time we've introduced a new role, so I thought it might be interesting to get some behind-the-scene insights onto what's going on. First, I want to introduce ourselves. I'm Merric. I'm a software engineer at VMware, and I started working at Pivotal back in 2018 and then was moved over for the acquisition. I've been working on CAPI for the last 2 years. Joining me today is Mona. She joined Pivotal back in 2018, has been working on CAPI ever since. Just to give you an idea of what to expect in this talk, first, I'll be giving a brief reminder of our current roles and the historical work we've done to improve the CF roles. Then I'll talk about what has made us set us on our current approach. After that, Mona will take us through the bounds of our new role, the steps we have taken to implement this with the community, and finally, there'll be a quick demo of this, how this might be used. As stated, it might be useful to understand how our current roles work to see how the space supporter could fit in. So these are our current roles in CloudFoundry. They can be broken down from top to bottom into global, organization, and space roles. And if you squint your eyes a little bit, you can kind of read them from left to right in decreasing permissibility between managers, read-write access, and finally just read access. So how did we get here? Well, when we started off, we designed these roles with 3 things in mind. We wanted to have managers, the kind of read-write access you would get from a developer, and then these read-only roles. However, the world doesn't necessarily map into these nice definitions easily. So people started requesting new roles. First, we found ourselves having to add global auditor and read-only admins, but we were getting so many requests that it wasn't really functional to constantly be having to consider and reject all these new roles that were being suggested by the community. So we came up with an exciting idea. We wanted to implement a project called Perm. The idea was to give each user full customization on their roles. We thought this was going to be a really good solution because first it would give users exactly what they need. They could craft a solution to tailor to their needs exactly. But it also meant that we as maintainers wouldn't have to be thinking about new roles all the time and having to have this conversation of what roles would be useful and what would be. So we put our best engineers on it, and we're very excited to see what kind of progress we made. There was just one problem. A year after we started, the project was scrapped for making pretty much no progress. So what happened? Why was it so hard? Well, we were in the middle of upgrading from V2 to V3, which meant that the engineers had to consider both code paths at the same time. The V2 code was, the access logic was spread all over the place and was a really complex beast that made it really hard to refactor. In addition, the test coverage was pretty spotty, which made it hard to catch regressions until much afterwards. And even when we did get it working, the performance on list endpoints was not very good yet. From the product perspective, there was a lot of complexity around all the different edge cases and understanding how the resources would relate to each other, because some of them were very tightly nested. So after we gave up on Perm, we were kind of back to the drawing board. Honestly, most of us were pretty unexcited to have to deal with this stuff again, and we were kind of on pause for a while. But finally, we finished V3, and people were still making requests for roles. So we decided to take another crack at it. So given that we've learned from Perm, which was that the scope was too big, the effort engineering was too difficult, we tried to figure out what we could do that would be smaller and easier. We decided to focus on implementing a few high-value roles. We figured we would get the majority of the value that way, but we wouldn't have to deal with as large a problem space. In addition, we could also, while we were working through this, start to improve some of the things like our test coverage that were giving us problems last time. The first step was to examine the data that we were getting from users about what kind of roles were needed. We found that the biggest hole in our roles was between the space developer and the space auditor. The space developer is a very permissive role that allows the user full read access and write access to all the resources in their space, whereas the space auditor provides comparatively little, just non-secret read access. So anybody who wants something like a restarting an app or scaling an app, or even just like binding a service to something, would need to use the full developer suite. But the developer can do so much more than that. They have the ability to read secrets. They have the ability to delete services like databases. They can push new apps. They can modify old apps. So it's a much more powerful thing. And there's a lot of roles that sort of fit between that space, between a space auditor and a space developer. We'll mostly be talking about the SRE, or the site reliability engineer, but this really applies for a lot of other roles too. So we've established that everyone who wants to be an SRE needs to have a space developer role. But what's wrong with that? Well, as stated by the principle of least privilege, every user of the system should operate using the least set of privileges necessary to complete their job. This serves two purposes: security and reliability. From a security standpoint, oftentimes companies contract out their IT department or have strict laws pertaining to security. They don't want to / can't give all this sensitive data to an SRE. From a reliability standpoint, people make mistakes. If someone isn't supposed to be able to delete a database, they shouldn't be able to. In its current form, users of CF are forced to choose between having a large number of SREs with a dev role, which comes with the problems as stated above, or relying on a small number of application devs to act as SREs. But this has its own issues. No app dev wants to be paged at 3 a.m. to be asked to simply restart an app. So creating a new role will empower more people to troubleshoot applications while ensuring strict security and availability requirements. Take it away, Mona.
Thanks, Merric. So now that Merric has outlined the problem space, I want to step into what the solution we've designed is. So the new role we've outlined in Cloud Controller is going to be called the Space Supporter. And Space Supporter is defined in part by what it can do, which is main app diagnostic, but also troubleshooting actions such as, checking your logs, restarting, turning it on and off again, things like that. But also it's defined by what it can't do, which is, viewing app secrets, which could be stored somewhere in your environment variables or in your source code. So they can't view or push source code at all. Can't do any deletes or major actions that might be unrecoverable or cause large amounts of downtime. And unfortunately, while it's very easy to look at a screen of certain actions that they can't perform or can perform, the API is defined by a lot more than just that. It has a very large surface area of endpoints, and concepts are broken down into these smaller units and definitions. So all in all, a large part of this work was scoping out how many endpoints we'd have to consider, and it was quite a few. Looks like nearly 200 endpoints to consider. So we kind of had a lot of corner cases here, and we dealt with this kind of by leaning on this North Star of we wanted to be overly permissive when it came to allowing the troubleshooter access to view something, but then a little more restrictive when it came to performing an action. And we also wanted to be sure that we weren't making these decisions in a vacuum. So we shared this proposal out with the open source community, and we gathered a lot of good feedback from a lot of different contributors who have a vested stake in this project, which has actually been one of the highlights of working on this project. The idea for having a role for this persona was brought to VMware's attention by our partners at SAP, and the work has been done as a shared effort amongst both VMware contributors and members of the open source community at SAP. This drove us to try and find a way to collaborate that would kind of have a low learning curve and a high transparency to any member of the open source community, which led us to a tool that we expect almost all developers are familiar with, GitHub. So just to give a quick overview of how we've set this up, we've used the GitHub projects feature, and we've set up a basic Kanban board to allow anybody to pick up work that's listed under to do, and we can now easily see what is in progress, what's ready to be accepted, and what's been merged in. And we've even added in the milestones feature so we could track our progress on this track altogether. So things have been going well. And finally, it's time for a short demo. So we've set up this demonstration based on some of the endpoints that we already have working for the Space Supporter role. So as you can see in this situation, if I keep refreshing the screen, my app is toggling between expected behavior and unexpected behavior. So what are some things I might do to troubleshoot this? Well, first, let's make sure I'm logged in as the space supporter role. Excellent. And now let me confirm for you all that I indeed have the roles that I claim to have. So here's a user with my username, and if I curl for any associated roles, I have permission to have a role in this organization and the space application supporter role type. Excellent. So what are some things I might try to do to troubleshoot? Let me check what apps are available, and I see we have 2 apps, and right off the bat, something interesting is the problem might be we have one route mapped to both apps, and that is the route that we are trying to hit here. So it seems like that's the root of the problem. Now, maybe I'm not thinking clearly, I got called in late, and I might try something a little reckless, like deleting one of these apps. But thankfully, this is not an option available to me. So maybe I would want to try and just look at the source code and see if I could just kind of figure it out that way. But there might be some hidden secrets or information I should not be privy to, so thankfully I can't do that either. So what are some less nuclear options available to this role to troubleshoot? Maybe I could look at events for one or both of these apps. Looks pretty standard. Maybe if I look at events for the second app, seems similar, except we've also tried to map a route at the last minute. So maybe I'm remembering now that my CI environments do blue-green deploys and not the excellent V3 feature for rolling deploys. So it looks like this temporary app, let's see if I curl events, audit events, then one of the most recent actions here is mapping a route for the app n+1 with, so maybe that's the app that I want to keep the route for. So looking at my routes, I can do an unmap route action for app n+1. And see what happens if I get rid of this. Oh, I wanted to unmap it to app n. Great. So if I go back to my website now and double check, looks like we are consistently getting that expected behavior. If I look at my apps, this is the route that I wanted, and it is pointing to the app that I want. And maybe at a later time, we could have an app developer come in and check and make sure that this is the expected behavior. And that's an overview of the work we've been doing to create some new custom roles in CloudFoundry. As I've mentioned, this has been a collaborative effort amongst members of the open source community. So please, if you have anything to contribute or want to participate in any way, we are available on Slack, and we are available, and this project is on GitHub Projects, as we've mentioned. QR codes here should link you directly there. So thanks for listening.
Right on Stefan's question, we are hoping within a month or two this will be completely wrapped up, but we already have a lot of these endpoints, mostly all these endpoints done. We're just crossing the I's, dotting the T's, that kind of thing. I do think a Perm-like project has a chance in the future. Yeah, I hope that a lot of the refactoring work, permission testing work, things like that came out of this role will actually lay the groundwork if we do want some kind of optional customizable roles in the future. It looks like there's a few questions in the Q&A tab to the top right. Yeah, so To answer Robert Green's questions, I was trying to see corresponding with. We do think like a lot of clients will need to make some updates to use this role. We're not planning on implementing it in V2, so clients that use mixed V2 and V3 endpoints are going to need to do like a good bit of modernization to help avoid some unpredictable behavior. We're leaning towards doing some kind of ban on V2 endpoints for this role with like warnings or other kinds of errors available as well. Maybe, yeah, only if you're logged in with only the space supporter role assigned, we think will give you an error if we're trying to curl any V2 endpoint.
I think it's also worth calling out that a lot of clients don't actually need access to this role. Like, we're hoping that a lot of the things like the CLI, which obviously need this role, we're going to actually we'll make sure that happens as well. But for a lot of the smaller projects, it's unclear like if they need this role. And if you have concerns about that, definitely appreciate letting us know so we can